Today's goal is El Bastardo Peak in the Madre Mountains wilderness. And let's take a look at it. Here it is, El Bastardo Peak. Now this is part of 3 or 4 different peaks here. Let's name them. There is Burnt Peak. And by the way, on the other side of these peaks is Red Rock Canyon. Here is La Madre Mountain. And there is the Devil's Slide, that limestone slide there. It's very visible. So you've got La Madre, the Mama, and behind La Madre, invisible at this point, is El Padre, the Papa, Burnt Peak, and El Bastardo, the Bastard. The goal is El Bastardo Peak. Maybe we'll get up to the summit of El Bastardo and then take a left and head over to Burnt Peak and then return, make it a little loop up there. Anyway, we are at the Twilight Zone parking area off Kyle Canyon Road, north of Las Vegas. And one thing to note about this parking area is that it's the entrance to an awesome network of mountain biking trails. So if you're into mountain biking, this is a great place to park and then head off on a mountain biking trail. Now, other mountains that are visible, there's the Mount Charleston Wilderness, and there's Mummy Mountain. Fletcher Peak, Mount Charleston, and Griffith Peak isn't visible at this point. I think we might be seeing the tip of Harris Mountain, not totally sure. But anyway, that gives you an idea where we are. And so back to El Bastardo, our goal. El Bastardo is in the La Madre Mountains Ridgeline, and we're going to be on top of that ridgeline soon and looking down on Red Rock Canyon. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Harris Springs Road, which is just a little bit to the east of this parking area. We're going to go up Harris Springs Road, find a little unpaved road that heads up to the base of La Madre Mountain, and then angle off to the right about halfway up that road, aim for El Bastardo, head over to Burnt Peak, and then back down to that La Madre Mountains road. So that's if everything works out as planned. So here we go. Okay, here we are not far from our starting point. We're at the intersection of Harris Springs Road and Kyle Canyon Road. And down Harris Springs Road, take just for a brief 1,000 feet, take a right, and then continue up Harris Springs Road to the right. Interesting, some new interpretive signs that have been placed here. Very nice. Harris Springs Recreation Area. You can pause the video and hopefully see the sign and read it. And here's something on the wildlife in this area. And on wildfires. And we will be, hopefully on Burnt Peak at some point. You'll see why it's called Burnt Peak. Anyway, okay, let's continue down Harris Springs Road and make that connection to the La Madre approach road. This is a great time to take a closer perspective on El Bastardo, just to see what we're going to be experiencing up near the summit. or at the summit. Notice there are some ribbons there. Those are limestone cliff lines, and they don't look like much from this perspective, but when you're there, you may be looking over the edge of a 20-foot cliff, and we'll need to figure out how to get around those cliff lines when we're up on El Bastardo. So just a note as to what you might be experiencing near the summit, and then we want to see if we can get over from El Bastardo, across those ribbon cliff lines over to Burnt Peak and then back down. So just a note to be aware of what you're going to be experiencing. Wow, this little branch of Harris Springs Road used to be a narrow, rocky road. Look how they have graded this. Amazing. And now they're calling this the Harris Springs Recreation Area. And as I look at the hills ahead, you see a series of trails. Looks like mountain bike or hiking trail there. Takes you up over the hills and then over in this direction. There's a little road. So yeah, I would suggest this as a spring experience, but look at these hills ahead. This would be an awesome place to hike with an amazing view of the La Madre Mountains and then over to the Mount Charleston Wilderness. So this is an area to explore in the spring or in the fall. Gets too hot in the summer. Okay, continuing onward. Now at the bottom of this nice wide graded stretch, notice there's a parking area if you wanted to use this as a jumping off point for mountain biking or maybe ATV. You'll have to check the regulations on ATVs around here. I've seen ATVs used on these roads. So now we're turning right onto Harris Springs Road, and let's hope that the nice grading continues. Yes, wow, this is really nice. If you've got a nice two-wheel drive, good tires, you could probably take this road so far, maybe all the way up to the La Madre Mountain road split off. We'll see. Okay, here about a half mile up Harris Springs Road is the only left turn you're going to see before the turn you actually want. So, well, at some point I'm going to explore this. This could be, looks like a more direct route to El Bastardo, but on the other hand, the condition of the pathway or road may make it take longer. So I'm not going to take a left here. I'm going to wait till we get to the La Madre approach road. Anyway, yeah, there's El Bastardo, Burnt Peak, and La Madre Mountain. And this road, yeah, if you were on a mountain bike under your own power, not an electric bike, this could be a pretty tough road because the rocks are fairly large and could slow you down. So yeah, I would take this. Two-wheel drive still would work on this road up to this point, but I don't know if I'd do a mountain bike. So for now, let's continue straight ahead up Harris Springs Road. By now we've come up Harris Springs Road, and in the distance you can see Gas Peak. Almost straight down Harris Springs Road, and then over in this direction, the Sheep Range. Very beautiful area here. Joshua Tree Forest, if you could call it a forest. This is about as forest as these trees get. Look at them. Wow. And here is Mummy Mountain from this perspective. Charleston Peak. Oh, and by the way, yeah, Fletcher Peak. So Mummy Mountain, Fletcher Peak, Charleston Peak, and then over to, I believe, Harris Mountain's right up here. And then there's a saddle that goes down along the upper end of Lovell Canyon and over to Griffith Peak. And I'm not sure you can see Griffith Peak from here. That may be the tip of it, but I'm just not sure. Anyway, reason I stopped here is to make a note. Here is where you turn off Harris Springs Road. So far, two-wheel drive would have gotten you to this point with good tires and a good motor. Yeah, now you're heading on to the La Madre Road. Goes up to La Madre Mountain and a great camping area up there. But yes, you need four-wheel drive if you're going beyond this point. High center may be able to do it, but I would do high-centered four-wheel drive. Okay, onward. Okay, a little further up on the La Madre Road, you'll see another connection. This is an approach road that comes from the west. We took the approach road that came from the east. You can see on the map where they form a kind of triangle. Either way, you're going to head up La Madre Road. You're going to take a left here. And yeah, let's take another look at El Bastardo. There's El Bastardo, and take a look at the approach ridges. You'll notice on the right, there are two approach ridges. And we're going to take the first one to the right, just below the summit. It arrives just below the summit there. So we need to get from here to that approach ridge, and the way to do that is to continue up La Madre Road until we hit a point where we need to descend. Notice there's a little valley here. There's a wash down there. We need to descend into the wash. I'll show you where that point is. Then we're going to take the wash a little ways until we get to the base of that approach ridge, and then begin ascending the approach ridge to the summit. So yeah, just looking around. El Bastardo to the left, Burnt Peak, and then further on, here's El Padre. Now you can see it. And here is La Madre with the Devil's Slide, the limestone slide there. And then just looking around, just so you can recognize where we are here. And there you have it. Let's head up the La Madre Road and find where we angle off to the right into that gully, which will be just to the left of this hill that you see there. Onward. We've been coming up the La Madre Road, and the reason I'm stopping here is that there is a little marker here that takes you down another road. But what we want to do is continue on just a bit further, and the goal is going to be soon to angle off to the right down into the gully below and head through this canyon here over to the base of the approach ridgeline. There's the approach ridgeline. So now you have an idea where we are, where we're headed. I'll show you the exact point that I'm going to angle off to the right and head down into the gully. You don't want to take too long or you're going to be angling away from that gully and the approach that you need to be on. Plus the gully gets deeper as you ascend. So let's see if we can find just the right spot to angle off to the right off this road. Having ascended this far on that La Madre road, the approach road, it looks like, for better or worse, this is the spot. You can see it on the map on the link page on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. This is the spot where we angle off to the right, and let's hope we can get easily into the gully below. So let's go ahead and do it. And by the way, there's El Bastardo on the right and Burnt Peak on the left, and you can see the approach ridge we've been pointing out earlier. There it is. So we're going to find the base of that approach ridge after we enter into the gully that's angling off to the right here. So here we go into the wilderness. Okay, just came from the hills, making a crossing from that La Madre road to the wash I'm in now. There's looking down the wash, but we want to go up the wash. It's a nice pathway actually. And what we're going to do is there's El Bastardo, and you can see the approach ridge that lands just to the left of the summit. We want to find the base of that approach ridge now. So let's continue on up the wash, and I'll show you where we make the next connection, which is the base of that approach ridge. And we'll leave the wash at that point. We've come up the wash to this point. We're at the base of the approach ridge. And these boulders, notice how there are more boulders here. And there is no section quite like this below where you've got all these boulders. There is our ascent. We get up to that ridge and then we'll take a look at what's next. The wash continues on this direction. We are ascending here to the approach ridge. Here we go. We've ascended from the wash below. It's just below. You can't see it because of the trees. Now we are on the approach ridge. And the main thing is going to be just to stay on this ridge. Don't go down to the left or the right. Stay on the center of this ridge till we get out in the open and we can see what lies ahead. Okay, now we can see where we are. We've ascended from the gully below and we stayed in the center of the approach ridge. You can't really see the entire ridge, but it goes somewhere in the center there of the video. So that's the approach ridge, the gully below, the base, just before the base of the hills immediately below. And then looking around, we can now see our approach to the summit, and it looks as if what we want to do is cross over, and you can see there are two potential approaches, one ridge on the right, one ridge on the left. I think I'm going to shoot for the ridge on the right. It looks easier to get to. The one on the left would require quite a descent and then reascent. So let's stick to the ridge on the right, and we'll summit on the right side of El Bastardo, right or west. And then just looking around, there is La Madre Mountain. So you get a perspective of where we are. And then looking over here, you can see Gas Peak through the trees, pointy high point, and then to the left, the Sheep Range. And then over in this direction, here's Angel Peak. Air Force radar installation. And then there's the Mount Charleston Wilderness with Mummy Mountain on the right, then panning to the left, and then Fletcher Peak is there also, panning toward the left. There is, now we can identify it better, there's Harris Mountain. And then you can see now the tip of Griffith Peak. And notice the snow there. This is the first week in May, and Griffith Peak is about 11,300 to 600 feet. And so you can see a lot of snow still up there. We are at about 6,000, 6,500, and no snow here. There is a little snow below El Bastardo. There in that gully. But I don't think we're going to encounter any snow on the way up the ridge line. So there you have it. Where we are, where we're headed. Let's see if we can get over that ridge on the right. Here's another perspective from a little further on in the approach ridge. And yeah, we're heading for that ridge line that's going to summit on the left of the west side of El Bastardo. And then look around. That's toward Mummy Mountain, toward Angel Peak. Sheep Range, Gas Peak, and then back to El Bastardo. Okay, continuing up this ridge, now we're in another open spot. And I was surprised coming through the forest below to look up and realize, wow, we are a lot closer than we were before. You can see it's just a matter of going up to the summit now and then finding a way down the left side. So it's looking pretty good. Don't know what's above, but so far, yeah, it looks doable. So let's continue on up toward the summit of El Bastardo. The cool thing about this ridge is that you go into the forest, you're weaving through the trees and the brush, and here we are looking down the ridge, by the way. The ridge we have ascended. But when you reach a clearing, you look up and you're that much closer to the summit. And I believe this right here is the summit. It's only, 200 to 300 feet elevation above where I'm standing right now. So yeah, It's just basically a long ladder, nothing technical, kind of a marathon so far today. But yeah, how beautiful. You've got juniper, you've got um, beautiful limestone all around as you approach the summit. And then ever expansive views in the distance. It's just an incredible circuit here. And by the way, yeah, now we can see Charleston Peak, Harris Mountain, and Griffith Peak. So those are pretty cool. And then you're looking over here toward the Wilson Ridge. Here's where the La Madre Ridge system meets with the Wilson Ridge. We're on the La Madre Ridge system right now. And you can see, wow, the Wilson Ridge is really broken up. So that's going to be another whole adventure in itself. What I found on the Wilson Ridge is that it's a series of high points. It's like climbing, you see each of these high points. Going across the Wilson Ridge is like climbing a series of 300 to 400 foot peaks, and it doesn't end. Here's the La Madre Ridgeline. Right over that ridge is Red Rock Canyon. And so we may be able to see Red Rock Canyon when we reach this high point above, which I believe is the summit. No promises. Maybe it's a false summit and I've got further to go. We don't know. Onward. That last high point that I showed you was not the summit because I think this is that high point, or this is even beyond that high point that I showed you. So yeah, let's look around. There is something higher ahead. Is this the summit? We don't know. It's about the elevation that the summit should be, but let's find out. And then just look around. The terrain is pretty open in places. Not technical though. Okay, onward. Elbow El Bastardo summit. There's the summit jar. Let's look around. Over in this direction. There's El Padre Mountain on the right, La Madre on the left. Then moving around this way. Las Vegas Valley and Strip. Turtlehead Peak in the center. To the left is Gray Cap Peak. To the right is Red Cap Peak. So that's pretty cool. See all three of those at the same time. Got to be up here. Gray Cap, Turtlehead, Red Cap. And let's continue looking around. There's not a whole lot of secure ground to stand on up here. Okay, yes. There is Blue Diamond Hill. And you're looking straight down into Red Rock Canyon. And then over in this direction, let's walk a little bit. Yes. Over here, You can see the Rainbow Mountains and Potosi Mountain in the background. So let's see how many we can identify. There would be North Sandstone Peak, and then Bridge Mountain, and after that, Rainbow Mountain, Juniper Peak below, and just a bit in front. And then over here, Mount Wilson. Yeah, there's Mount Wilson. And then beyond that, yeah, you got the Southern Rainbow Mountains. There'd be Indecision Peak and Little Zion's down there. And Windy Peak. Let's just zero in on Windy Peak. There's Windy Peak, right in the center. And then, yeah, let's look around this way. What you're seeing here is the La Madre Ridgeline heading toward that next ridgeline, higher ridgeline, which is Wilson Ridge. Okay, there's the La Madre Ridgeline. And then we move along that ridgeline. You can see Rocky Gap Road down in this area. There it is. And then there's the Wilson Ridgeline. And I called this Knife's Edge Pinnacle. That's right above the summit of Rocky Gap Road, which is below to the left. And then that's where you find the ascent route toward Bridge Mountain. And then you're looking up the Wilson Ridgeline. Here's what I call the southern high point. You can look that up on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. And I've reached that from Level Canyon. And then you see the ridgeline continuing. And it's going up to Harris Mountain, which is right up here, this high point. And then there's a saddle, and then up to Griffith Peak, and then down Sexton Ridge and Level Canyon is between the Wilson Ridge and Sexton Ridge. And then, yeah, back to Griffith Peak. To the right would be Charleston Peak. Over here might be Lee Peak. And then here's Mummy Mountain. In the foreground would be Fletcher Peak. Just a little below, dark green. And then there's Lee Canyon Road. And Angel Peak. And then let's reposition ourselves and see what's visible that we haven't pointed out yet. Okay, we just looked at Lee Canyon Road, Angel Peak. Then over in this direction, that's the salt pan down there is on the I-95 or Highway 95 corridor. Here is the Sheep Range. And over to Gas Peak. And then below is Fossil Ridge. So there you have it. And then we're back at La Madre Mountain on the left, El Padre Mountain on the right. And by the way, down in this area, Little Red Rock. So there you have it. What you can see from the summit of El Bastardo. Beautiful place up here. Now we've got to hightail it back. I'm going to see if I can hit Burnt Peak, which is somewhere down in this direction. We'll get a look at it, better look as we head in that direction. So let's see if we can hit Burnt Peak and then head down Burnt Peak Ridgeline back to the upper end of that La Madre road that we were on earlier, and then Harris Springs Road, and finally back to where we started. So here we go. Okay, now we're looking at the way to Burnt Peak. And I believe Burnt Peak is right up here. I believe that's Burnt Peak. And you can see we've got a little weaving around this ridge before we get over to Burnt Peak. Don't know how that's going to work. Remember that line of cliffs, that band of cliffs we saw from below in the beginning? And I mentioned that they didn't look like much from below, from that distance, but could be 20-foot cliffs. So we'll see if there's a way around and then down to Burnt Peak. Here we go. Okay, looking back, I've been inching my way along the north side of El Bastardo. And you see there's almost a little pathway here, but I wouldn't count on it. There is the ridge line below that I took coming up. And here we've got some options here. There's an alternate ridge line heading downward. Or I could continue along here. I think I'm going to continue along here for a while, just skirting the north edge of the ridge system between El Bastardo and Burnt Peak, and see if I can find a way over to Burnt Peak and then down that ridge line, which will land me right at the upper end of the La Madre Road. We'll see. There could be barriers along the way, but at least we got two options now. Continue along this ridge line or descend to that ridge line below. Both might work. I know the one below would work. I'm not sure about this one. Let's find out. And by the way, here's a great view of Harris Springs Ranch. Beautiful little oasis in the upper desert. Okay, you can see how I've been skirting just below the top of this ridge. And there has been a little trail here and there, so that's good. That's looking back toward El Bastardo. El Bastardo is further beyond that high point. You see the rocky high point ahead. Okay, and now what's next? Okay, we're seeing Burnt Peak, looking very close here. Nice, nice. I don't see the pathway to Burnt Peak yet, but it looks like it would just be skirting this area down here below, and then over to Burnt Peak, and then down Burnt Peak's ridgeline, all the way down to the La Madre Road down there below. I think you can see part of it, not sure. A lot of glare on this screen. But then if you look further, you can see it winding down toward Harris Springs Road. And then you take a right on Harris Springs Road, heading back to our starting point. So yeah, I could head down this ridge I'm on right here, but I want to see if I can get over to Burnt Peaks descent ridge and take that downward. So let's see how that's going to work. Looking back toward El Bastardo, a lot of weaving around through the rock formations, and you can see there's pretty substantial cliffs there, but there was a little opening right here. That's the opening we took to get to where we are now. And right now, we're pretty close to Burnt Peak, almost at the saddle between Burnt Peak and El Bastardo. So more of that will become visible toward Burnt Peak real soon. And through those trees you were looking at, there is Burnt Peak. There's the peak, and then you can see its descent ridge heading downward. Now, I've been on the peak 2 or 3 times, and you can see those adventures on Las Vegas area trails. What I might do today is just angle over to the descent ridge and then downward. But if you wanted to go up to Burnt Peak, yeah, it's pretty easy loop from where we are right now. So let's head down to the saddle below and then angle over to Burnt Peak's descent ridge. Well, there was one more rocky area to descend around right ahead there in the center, and the earlier one now in the center just to the right. Yeah, now we are officially on the saddle, and this is the saddle between Burnt Peak and El Bastardo. There's Burnt Peak. So we're going to wind around and see if we can start angling downward on the descent slope. See how that works. Okay, we have just crossed the space between El Bastardo's summits, and we're now on the Burnt Peak descent ridgeline. But a note to myself and to anyone else who's listening, remember how I was going to take a shortcut and just cut right across this area rather than go up to Burnt Peak and then down? Well, don't do it. It was a lot harder traversing that space trying to do my little shortcut than it would have been just to go up to Burnt Peak, which is right up there, and then descend. So yeah, go to Burnt Peak if you do this loop. Don't try to cut across. And now we are on the descent ridge, and so we're going to see how that ridge goes. I've been on this a couple times, once in the dark, so it should go well. And there's El Padre Mountain. La Madre would be behind. Or actually, that may be La Madre, and El Padre would be to the right and around the ridge line. We don't know. Okay, heading down the ridge line here, Burnt Peaks Ridge, Descent Ridge. Here we go. There are a few rocky outcrops like the one ahead on this descent ridge from Burnt Peak, but just study them. You can find a way. For instance, this one right here, there's a little pathway on the right side. So you circle around the right and then on up. And then it's usually gradual on the other side. So it's not like this. It's not a cliff on both sides. We've been descending Burnt Peak's descent ridge. There's Burnt Peak. And it helps to recognize what the base of the ridge looks like, what you're shooting for. And so you can see down below, see that little hill? There is the summit of the La Madre Road. And from there, it's just down La Madre Road to Harris Springs Road, and then back to your starting point. So it's important to recognize that, because if you angle off to the left, you're going to be in a world of hurt. There's a lot of brush and canyons, and there's just a lot of obstacles. So at this point where you see the upper end of La Madre Road, head down the ridge toward La Madre Road, toward that point. The ridge is going to want to take you off to the left. Don't do it. And by the way, also from this point, you can see Burnt Peak very clearly, and how it descends to a saddle and then ascends to El Bastardo. So it's good to at least know how the terrain is laid out, especially if you come from this direction. You just want to know that's what you want to do. And again, I strongly suggest you go straight up to Burnt Peak and then down the ridge line to the saddle and then up to El Bastardo. Don't try to cut across like I did. Wow, what a pain. And here's a great perspective on La Madre Mountain. And if you're ascending La Madre Mountain, you'd want to head across this canyon below, get on that ridge, and then just head on up to La Madre Mountain summit. The summit of Devil's Slide is right there, kind of fun to look at. And then you can see from La Madre Mountain, from that summit, there's a saddle. You descend that saddle and then ascend up to El Padre summit, which would be up here in this area. And then at the base of that saddle, between La Madre and El Padre, is what we call the notch, which is a route you can take to cross over and down into the Calico Basin. So there's a little more on the terrain around here. And then, of course, looking out in the distance, there's Gas Peak. It's a good reference point. and there's the sheep range. And then over to the Charleston Wilderness. We're now near the upper end of the La Madre Road. So it's just a matter now of taking this road down to Harris Springs Road, take a right on Harris Springs Road, and head back to our start point. So it's roads all the way back now.